Hello and welcome back to Vale Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales veiled in noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. The sun was beginning to set, and my patience was almost gone. I had walked the same patch of grass 3 times already, following the fence line back and forth like some sad amateur detective who had watched too many true crime documentaries. I was looking for the same thing everyone else had failed to find before me. The forensics team had not found it. A few obsessive bloggers had not found it either. Even a retired police detective who wrote long posts about the case had been out there twice and still came back empty-handed. And yet, somehow, I had convinced myself I had a chance. The place was Gorsewood Holiday Park, though it did not look like much of a holiday park from where I stood. Not anymore. Most of the public areas were quiet, almost abandoned, the way places become after a horrible story attaches itself to them. The families were gone. The laughter was gone. Even the birds seemed quieter than they should have been. The grass near the fence was damp and uneven. Dead leaves had gathered in clumps against the bottom wire, and the last orange light of the sun made everything look older than it was. My shoes were muddy, my back hurt, my phone battery was nearly dead. I told myself I would walk the fence one more time, and then I would give up. That was when I saw it. A small flash. The sun caught something through the leaves on the other side of the barbed wire fence. It was only a thin edge of reflected light, so quick I almost missed it. But something about it froze me in place. My heart started beating faster. I crouched down and leaned closer to the fence. At first, I saw nothing but old leaves, grass, and dirt. Then I pushed my arm carefully between 2 strands of wire, trying not to tear my sleeve or skin, and brushed the leaves away. There it was. A mobile phone? No, not a mobile phone. The mobile phone, it was filthy, discolored, and half buried in damp leaves, but I knew immediately what I had found. The shape matched. The case matched. Even before I touched it, I felt that horrible little spark of certainty. My hand shook as I pulled it through the fence. The battery was dead, of course. I pressed the power button anyway, just in case. Nothing happened. The screen stayed black. I did not mind. If anything, that only made the moment last longer. I should have called the police right then. I should have handed it in without touching another button. I should have done the sensible, decent, legal thing. But if I did that, I might never know. I might never see what was on it. I wish I had called them. I think about that every day. The drive home took 2 hours, which gave me too much time to think. At first, I felt nervous, then excited, then, shamefully, smug. So many people had been to Gorsewood Holiday Park after the case officially closed 6 months earlier. Professionals had searched it, bloggers had searched it, true crime obsessives had walked around taking photographs and whispering theories into their phones. And yet here I was, a man who stacked shelves for a living, driving home with the missing phone in my glove compartment. I had only been there for 3 hours. Maybe I had a knack for that kind of thing. That was what I told myself, anyway. One of the men I followed on the blog, The Truth About Ryan, was a retired detective. He had gone to the site twice looking for the phone. He had written entire essays about search patterns, police incompetence, and missed opportunities. I had read all of it. I had read everything. Everyone on that blog talked about the importance of finding Toby Gibbs's phone. Toby was Ryan's father. He had sworn on his life that the phone would prove his innocence. He said it would explain everything. He said it would show what really happened to his son. If only someone had found it sooner. Just over a year before I found the phone, 3 men had been arrested for the murder of 11-year-old Ryan Gibbs. Toby had taken Ryan away without permission from his ex-wife. Due to custody restrictions, he was only supposed to have Ryan for the weekend. But instead of taking him home on Sunday evening, he drove him across the country to Gorsewood Holiday Park. He had booked a lodge for the week and invited his two best friends, George Taylor and Tom White. The next day, Ryan vanished. Toby, George, and Tom all told the same story. They told it during questioning. They told it during trial. They kept telling it even after everyone else decided it was insane. According to them, they had been playing catch with Ryan in one of the open fields at the holiday park. Ryan missed a throw, and the ball bounced into a hollow tree trunk lying in the grass. Ryan crawled inside to get it. As a joke, George and Tom rolled the log while he was inside. Toby claimed he filmed it on his phone. He said Ryan did not come back out. When they checked, the hollow log was empty. In his panic, Toby said he dropped his phone and lost it in the grass. The police searched the entire campsite for Ryan, but they did not find him until the next morning. His body was discovered stuffed into the center of the same hollow log, in 6 pieces. Nobody believed the 3 men after that. Their story was too absurd. Their previous convictions made it worse. George had only been out of prison for a few months after a manslaughter charge and was still on parole. Toby and Tom had both served time before, too. Toby had once severed his brother's hand during what he described as a life-or-death struggle after his brother stabbed him several times. Both brothers had gone to prison. Tom had been in and out since he was 17, mostly for assault. 3 men with violent pasts, 1 missing boy, 1 impossible story, then a body in pieces. It was not hard to understand why they were convicted, but Toby had changed according to everyone who knew him after prison. He attended community events, he volunteered, he joined a church, he helped with charity drives. He tried, finally, to become a proper father to Ryan, which his ex-wife had not exactly welcomed. Some people said he was making amends. Others said people like Toby never truly changed. I did not know him. All I knew came from articles, court summaries, comments, and blog posts. The truth about Ryan had started as a local support page. At first, people posted memories of Toby, photos from church events, stories about his volunteer work, and arguments about why he could not have killed his own son. Over time, the blog became obsessed with the missing phone. If the phone existed, it could prove whether Toby had lied, or whether the impossible had happened. My friend Chris was the one who got me interested in the case. Before he moved up north and became my flatmate, he had lived a few doors down from Toby. He showed me the blog one night after a few drinks, and I was hooked almost immediately. I read every post. I followed every theory. I rooted for every person who announced they were going to Gorsewood to search. Chris had no idea that while he was at work that day, I had taken time off, driven down there, and found what everyone else had missed. I kept opening the glove compartment during the drive just to make sure the phone was still there. Every time I saw it, my stomach flipped. I imagined getting home, charging it, telling Chris, watching the video, seeing the truth for myself. I did not even consider that the video might not exist, or that the memory card might be ruined, or that Toby might have lied. In my mind, the phone already held answers. I was on the final stretch of motorway, about 15 minutes from town, when my car suddenly shut down. I was going 85 when it happened. The headlights cut out first, then the engine, then the power steering. Everything went black. For a second, my brain could not understand what had happened. The road vanished ahead of me, swallowed by darkness. As my eyes adjusted, I realized the car was drifting toward the center barrier. I slammed the brakes and pulled the wheel with all my strength. Without power steering, it felt impossibly heavy. The car lurched, slowed, and shuddered to a stop at an angle. Then I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. A car was coming up fast. My heart lurched so hard it hurt. I twisted the key again and again. The engine coughed. The approaching driver held down their horn. At the last possible second, my car spluttered back to life. The other car swerved around me, horn blaring as it narrowly avoided smashing into my rear. After that, my car drove normally. Completely normally. I stayed in the slow lane the rest of the way. and did not go over 50. My hands were still shaking when I got home. I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock the front door. Chris was sitting on the sofa watching TV. I walked in, stood directly in front of him, and placed the phone on the coffee table. He looked down at it, then up at me. No way. He turned off the TV and leaned forward. The phone was in bad shape. Its surface was discolored from more than a year outside. Dirt had worked into every gap. Something strange and pale had grown from the charging port, like fungus or rot. The screen was scratched, stained, and dead. Chris grabbed his laptop, opened the blog, and searched through the old posts about Toby's phone. After a minute, he turned the screen toward me, showing a generic photo of the model Toby had supposedly lost. His eyes widened. "Dude," he said, "you fucking found it. We need to clean it up and see if it charges." I started moving around the room too fast, opening drawers and looking for spare USB cables. Chris rushed to his desk and came back with tweezers. I watched as he carefully pulled the fungus out of the charging port. Our excitement faded when 3 small chunks of rusted metal fell onto the table. "It's fucked," Chris groaned, dropping his head into his hands. I was not ready to give up. I grabbed the phone, plugged it into a charger, and placed it on his desk. "There's no point," Chris said. "It's fucked. No harm trying." For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then we heard crackling. After that came the smell, burning plastic. We both rushed to the desk. Arcs of electricity jumped from the phone to the charger cable. The lower part of the phone had started to warp, and the cable was melting. I grabbed it and yanked it free, but the softened plastic stretched like melted cheese before the wires snapped away. We stood there staring. The end of the charger was fused to the bottom of the phone. The lower screen had cracked and bulged. Plastic around the edges bubbled and turned brittle. It was truly ruined. When the phone cooled, I picked it up anyway. Chris had gone back to the sofa, defeated. I sat at his desk and used a flathead screwdriver to pry the back cover off. Orange water dripped onto the desk. The smell that followed was awful. Stagnant, metallic, rotten. The motherboard was a wreck of rust and oxidation. My hope almost died there. Then I saw the memory card. I removed it carefully with the tweezers. Somehow it looked almost perfect. "Chris," I shouted, "turn your PC on." He looked annoyed at first, then confused, then excited when he saw what I was holding. He scrambled to his chair and powered up the computer. I stood over his shoulder, barely breathing, waiting for it to load. "This is it," Chris whispered. He plugged in a USB card reader and slid it toward me. I inserted the memory card. The little green light flashed. Then the computer turned off. Our faces appeared in the black reflection of the monitor. Chris sighed, "Piece of shit." We waited again. This time, the computer started properly. A File Explorer window opened. Chris clicked through folders while I stood behind him, sweating. Then thumbnails appeared, photos. "That's Ryan," I said. The boy's face filled the little images. Ryan standing in the field, Ryan holding a ball, Ryan laughing. Chris scrolled to the bottom. There it was, a video file. He looked at me. I nodded. He pressed play. The video appeared vertically, taking up the middle of the screen. Ryan stood in a sunny field, holding a tennis ball and looking toward the camera. The sky above him was clear blue. The sun shone over his shoulder. "Right," Toby said from behind the phone. "It's filming. Go." Ryan threw the ball. The camera followed it through the air as George and Tom ran for it and crashed into each other. Everyone laughed. "Go long," Tom shouted. The camera panned to Ryan as he ran backward. Eyes on the sky, hands raised. The ball flew just out of reach. He dove after it, missed, and landed in the grass. The ball bounced farther down the field and rolled into the open end of a hollow tree trunk. Chris paused the video. He looked at me. I nodded again. He pressed play. "I'll get it," Ryan called. He ran to the log, got on all fours, and started crawling inside. Psst, psst. The camera turned to show George and Tom running quietly toward the log. Tom pointed at it and mimed pushing. George held a finger to his lips. From behind the camera, Toby chuckled. Ryan's feet disappeared into the hollow. George and Tom began pushing the log. It rolled once, then twice. They laughed like children. For a moment, the camera shifted upward, and the sun glared directly into the lens. After 2 full rotations, they stopped. Tom bent over with his hands on his knees, still laughing. Ryan did not come out. 10 seconds passed. The laughter died. "Ryan," Toby called. "You all right?" Silence. Toby moved toward the log. He placed one hand on the edge and pointed the camera inside. Chris whispered, "Fuck." I said, "He was telling the truth." You could see straight through the hollow log and out the other end. Ryan was gone. "What the fuck?" Toby shouted. The camera dropped to his shoes as he lost focus on filming. "Ryan!" The other two were panicking in the background. Toby started running, still shouting his son's name. Then the phone slipped from his hand. The image spun wildly, bounced a few times, and landed lens down. The screen went black. Chris skipped through the remaining 20 minutes. There was nothing to see. Only muffled voices, confused shouting, crying, and the distorted sound of 3 men falling apart in real time. We watched the video again. Then again, we studied every second between Ryan entering the log and Toby pointing the camera through it. The log never left the frame. There was no cut, no gap. No way for Ryan to crawl out unseen. Then I noticed something. During the moment when the sun flared into the lens, the upper left corner of the image glitched. Some pixels turned black. "Pass me the mouse," I said. I opened a video editor and went frame by frame. The first distorted frame showed a neat ring of black pixels around the sun. In the next frame, the black pixels formed a straight line from the edge of the sun to the center of the log. In the frame after that, they became a black triangle. Its point touched the sun, and its widening edges lined up perfectly with both ends of the hollow trunk. Then, in the next frame, the black pixels were gone. I clicked back to the triangle frame. I stared at it. At first, I was focused only on the glitch. Then, I noticed George and Tom. My hair stood up. In the frame before, they were looking at the log as they pushed it, both smiling. In the triangle frame, their heads had snapped toward the camera. Their faces were completely blank. No laughter, no expression. They were staring directly into the lens. I clicked forward. They were looking at the log again, laughing. I clicked back. Blank faces, staring. "Chris," I said, my voice barely working. "What?" Then I saw his reflection in the dark part of the screen. He was looking at me. His face was completely blank. My heart thudded so hard I thought it pushed me backward from the desk. Chris stood. "I'm gonna piss myself," he said suddenly. Then he rushed to the bathroom. I stood there for a long time. After a while, I sat back down and closed everything on the screen. My hands would not stop shaking. Chris did not come back. At first, I did not notice. I was too busy sitting with my own thoughts, replaying those blank faces, the black triangle, Ryan vanishing inside the log. After about half an hour, I pulled out my phone and texted him. "You've been in there a while. Everything okay?" His phone buzzed on the coffee table. The sound made me drop my own phone onto the desk. I slowly stood and walked toward the bathroom. Then the power went out. The flat fell into darkness, except for the orange streetlight striping the room through the blinds. I stumbled toward the hall, breathing too fast, and found the breaker box by memory. My fingers fumbled over the switches until I found the tripped one and flicked it back. Light returned. I looked down the hall. The bathroom door was ajar. The light inside was off. "Chris." No answer. I walked closer, reached for the bathroom door, and pulled it open. No one was inside. I searched the entire flat after that. Every room, every closet, under the beds, behind curtains. The front door was still locked. The only way out was through the living room, and he could not have passed me without being seen. Chris was gone. I ran to the front door and turned the latch. It clicked, then spun freely without unlocking. I tried again. Nothing. I was trapped inside. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but it shut off in my hand and would not turn back on. I grabbed Chris's phone from the coffee table. It would not work either. Then the power went out again. The flat suddenly felt too small. The walls seemed closer. The air felt thick. I could not breathe properly. Heat flashed through me, then cold. My knees weakened. My stomach churned. I collapsed to the floor. I must have blacked out. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in the living room. Sunlight came through the window and warmed my skin. For one beautiful second, I felt calm. Then I remembered. The phone. The video. Chris. I sat up too quickly and Toby's phone clattered across the floor. Had I been holding it? I ran to the front door, praying it would open. It did not. I kicked it, screamed for help, slammed my shoulder into it until pain shot down my arm. No one answered. No one came. Then I felt a sudden, desperate need to piss. It hit so hard I doubled over. I ran toward the bathroom, but the door was closed. I stopped outside it. "Chris?" I whispered. "Are you in there?" I already knew. My hand found the door handle. I turned it silently and pulled the door open just a crack. Warm piss ran down my legs and onto the floor. It mixed with the blood spreading toward my feet. Chris was in there. Pieces of him were scattered across the bathroom. His head sat on top of the toilet seat, his face twisted with terror. One leg was hooked over the edge of the bath, the other hung out of the sink. His torso lay on the bath mat, blood still pouring from where his limbs should have been. I never saw his arms. I vomited onto the floor, adding to the mess around my feet. There was only one choice left: the window. We were on the third floor, but there were hedges below. If I landed right, I might survive. I ran to the living room window and opened it. Cold air rushed in. I shouted for help until my throat burned. I screamed that I was trapped. No one came out of their houses. No cars passed. No one walked the street below. Then a man rounded the corner. "Help!" I screamed. "Please, he's dead. I'm trapped." His head snapped up toward me. His eyes were wide. His face was expressionless. A violent ringing filled my ears. Bright lights flashed across my vision. One second, I was at the window. The next, I was somewhere else. The sun shone directly into my eyes so bright it hurt. But the sky was black, not dark like night. Black like a hole. The ground beneath me twitched. I tried to stand, but when I put weight on one leg, it sank into the surface. I looked down once and then tried not to look again. The ground was flesh, mottled pink, red, gray, and purple. Damp in patches, warm in others. Under my hand was a mat of wiry hair slick with something I did not want to identify. I cried for what felt like hours. There was nothing else to do. I screamed eventually, not for help, but because silence had become unbearable. My screams echoed strangely across the fleshy plain, bouncing back at me from every direction. The ground began to shudder. My hand sank through the patch of hair. Pain exploded through my forearm. I yanked back, screaming harder than before. Blood sprayed across my face. My arm ended below the elbow. A stump. I flailed like I was drowning, trying to crawl away as circular holes opened and closed beneath me. They gaped like mouths, wet and toothless, then squeezed shut. My other arm dropped through one, and the flesh closed around my shoulder. I fell face first onto the cold, wet surface. My body stopped obeying me. The pain became too large for thought. There was no room left for fear, no room for memory, no room for Chris or Ryan or the phone or the black triangle in the sun. I lay there motionless as the world took me apart, piece by piece. And just before the last of me was pulled under, I heard a child laughing from somewhere inside the flesh. Then Toby's voice, faint and broken, called out from very far away, "Ryan?" Story 2. In 1996, I was working as a contractor in northern Arizona. Most of the work I took back then was repair work. Cabins with sagging roofs, old fire towers with rotting steps, ranger stations that had not seen real maintenance in years. The kind of jobs other contractors did not want because they were too far from town, too inconvenient, and did not pay enough to make the trip feel worth it. I took them anyway. I was younger then, stubborn, and always short on money. I also liked working alone. There was something peaceful about being far from highways and towns, with nothing around me but pine trees, rock, wind, and whatever job needed doing. I did not have a wife waiting at home. No kids. No real reason to turn down work just because it was lonely. In October of that year, I got a call from a Park Service office. The woman on the phone asked if I was available for a 2-week repair job at a ranger station deep in the mountains. How deep? I asked. She paused like she was looking at a map. About 40 miles from the nearest paved road, she said. Maybe more, depending on the condition of the track. I should have asked why they wanted to repair a station that far out. I should have asked why it had been abandoned for almost 20 years. I should have asked why no one else had taken the job. Instead, I asked about pay. It was bad, but not bad enough for me to say no. The station, she told me, had been abandoned since the late 70s. No one said why, just that it needed to be assessed, cleaned up, and made usable again for occasional seasonal staff. There was no power, no phone line, no running water. I would need to bring my generator, tools, supplies, and enough food to last the job. That was normal for the kind of work I did. So I loaded my truck and went. The drive out there took most of a day. The last stretch was nothing but dirt track winding through pine forest and canyon country. The road was in terrible shape. In some places, it was hardly a road at all, just 2 old tire ruts cutting through grass and loose stone. My truck bounced and groaned over rocks. Branches scraped the sides. More than once, I had to get out and move fallen limbs out of the way. By the time I reached the clearing, the sun was already starting to drop. The ranger station sat at the edge of a wide open patch of dirt and dry grass. Tall pines stood around the clearing like a crowd watching from a distance. The building was low and weather-beaten, with faded brown siding and a porch that leaned slightly to one side. One window was broken. The roof sagged in the middle. Half of it looked like it had already given up and fallen inward. It was worse than they had described. That did not surprise me. People always described old buildings better than they were, especially when they were trying to hire someone to fix them. I parked near the porch and stepped out into the cold mountain air. It was quiet, not peaceful quiet, heavy quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing and the small noises your clothes make when you move. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Rotten wood, mold, old animal droppings, damp dust. The kind of air that gets trapped inside a closed building for years and turns sour. When I pushed open the front door, the smell came out at me like something exhaling. Inside, the station was a mess. Half the roof had collapsed over one side of the main room. Water had come in for years, staining the walls black with mold. Rat nests filled drawers, shelves, and corners. Old papers had been chewed to scraps. A rusted stove sat in one corner, its pipe bent and useless. The floorboards creaked under my boots in a way I did not like. The place felt wrong from the moment I stepped inside. Not haunted. I did not believe in haunted places then. I am not sure I believe in them now, not in the way people mean when they say the word. I did not feel ghosts. I did not hear voices. Nothing moved in the corners. It was just heavy, like the air inside had not moved in a very long time, like the building had been waiting with its mouth closed. I spent the first 2 days doing basic work. I cleared out debris, tore down damaged wood, checked the remaining frame, and made lists of supplies I would need if anyone seriously expected the place to be usable again. I set up my generator outside, ran a work light through one of the windows. and slept in my truck because I did not trust the roof enough to sleep inside. During the day, the station was unpleasant but manageable. At night, it was different. The clearing would go dark fast. Once the sun dropped behind the trees, the temperature fell with it. My generator would rumble beside the truck, and the work light would throw a harsh yellow glow through the broken windows of the station. Beyond that light, the forest was a wall of black trunks and deeper shadows. I never saw anything. But I often had the feeling that something beyond the clearing could see me. On the third day, I was working in the old office area. It was a small room at the back of the station, with water-damaged shelving along one wall and a desk that had warped so badly the drawers would not open. I was pulling out rotten shelves, one at a time, breaking them loose from the wall. Behind the last set of shelves, I found a door. At first, I thought it was a panel or some kind of storage hatch. It was narrow, only wide enough for one person to pass through sideways. The edges had been hidden behind the shelving, and the wood around it had been painted to match the wall years ago. But it was a door, an actual door, set into the wall like it had been built with the station, then covered up later on purpose. The hinges were rusted shut. There was no knob, just a small metal pull that had nearly disappeared under layers of grime. I stood there staring at it for a while with my crowbar in one hand. I do not know why it made me uneasy. Old buildings have strange features sometimes. Hidden storage, sealed spaces, changes made by people who never bothered to document them. I had found plenty of odd things behind walls before, but this felt different. The door looked less like it had been forgotten and more like it had been concealed. I wedged the crowbar into the frame and forced it open. The hinges screamed. Behind the door was a small room, no bigger than a pantry. There were no windows. The walls were concrete, which was immediately strange because the rest of the station was timber frame. Someone had built this room differently from the rest of the structure. Deliberately. Stronger, colder, more permanent. My work light barely reached inside, so I brought it closer and aimed it through the opening. There was a metal desk against one wall, a broken chair lay tipped on its side, and on the floor beneath the desk was a wooden box. The box had no label, no lock, just a plain heavy wooden box with a lid that had swollen slightly from age. I dragged it out into the office and opened it. Inside were file folders, dozens of them. Some were typed on official Park Service letterhead. Some were handwritten on notebook paper. Some were little more than scraps folded and tucked inside larger folders. Many were yellowed with age. A few had water stains. Others looked newer, though none looked recent. The oldest file I found that day was dated 1931. The newest was from 1982. Over 50 years of reports, all hidden in the same room. Every folder had the same stamp across the front. Red ink, block letters. Do not file. I remember sitting there on the floor with that box open in front of me, listening to the generator outside and the wind moving through gaps in the roof. I should have closed the box right then. I should have put it back in the room, nailed the shelves over the door again, and pretended I had never found it. Instead, I started reading. I did not read all of them that night. 5 or 6 was enough. They were incident reports. Or they had started as incident reports, the kind rangers write when something happens in the backcountry. Lost hikers, missing campers, injured hunters, people needing rescue. The sort of paperwork that should go into a system, get copied, get filed, and eventually be forgotten in some office archive. But somebody had decided these reports should not exist. The first one I read involved a father and son who disappeared during a weekend hike in the 1930s. Their camp was found intact, fire pit cold, packs still inside the tent, food hanging properly from a tree, both pairs of boots placed neatly beside the bedrolls. No sign of struggle, no blood, no tracks that made sense. They found the father 3 days later, nearly 20 miles away over terrain no man could have crossed barefoot in that time. His feet were torn to pieces, but he was alive. He kept saying his son had gone under the stone. He would not explain what that meant. The boy was never found. The second report was from the 1940s. A woman hiking with her sister vanished during a short walk from camp to a creek. The sister said she turned away for less than a minute. When she looked back, the woman was gone. Her boots were later found side by side on a flat rock near the creek, laces tucked inside them. Searchers found no footprints leading away. The third was about a hunter who returned after being missing for 2 days. He was found sitting on a logging road in his underwear, holding his boots in his lap. He had no memory of where he had been. He spoke normally at first, then became terrified when anyone mentioned caves. There were no mapped caves in that area. I kept reading. Different years, different parks, different rangers. The same details kept returning. Camps left untouched, food uneaten, gear still packed, no signs of human violence, and the boots, always the boots, left behind in tents, placed beside bedrolls, set carefully at trail edges, sometimes found miles from where the missing person had last been seen, sometimes clean when they should have been muddy, sometimes wet inside when there had been no rain. It was not once, it was not twice. It happened across decades, across different parts of the country. The rangers writing the reports could not have all known each other. Some were separated by years, states, and entire generations. Yet the wording changed only slightly. Subject's boots located near camp. Footwear found placed neatly beside trail. Missing person believed to have left area barefoot. I turned folder after folder in my hands, and the room seemed to grow colder around me. Someone knew. That was the thought I could not shake. Someone had seen the pattern. Someone had collected these reports and hidden them behind a wall in an abandoned ranger station. Someone had stamped every one of them with the same words. D.O. not file. By then, it was late. The work light buzzed beside me. My back ached from sitting on the floor. Outside, the generator sputtered once, then steadied. The forest beyond the broken windows was completely black. I closed the box. For a long time, I just sat there with one hand resting on the lid. I told myself it was none of my business. I was a contractor. I was there to repair a building, not steal government files, and involve myself in decades of things I did not understand. But I also knew something else. If I put the box back, it would disappear again, maybe forever. And those people in the files would remain buried in a way that had nothing to do with graves. So I loaded the box into my truck. I kept working after that, though the station never felt the same. Every creak in the walls made me stop. Every time the wind moved through the gaps in the roof, I thought of bare feet crossing pine needles. I started sleeping even less. I kept the box in the cab of the truck with a tarp over it, though I could not have said why. On my last morning at the station, something happened. I woke early, around 5:30. The sky was still gray. Frost clung to the grass in the clearing. My back hurt from sleeping in the truck, and my breath fogged in the air when I opened the door. I stepped outside and looked down. The dirt in front of the station was soft. I had been walking through it for days, tracking my own boot prints in and out. I knew what my prints looked like: heavy work boots, deep heel, worn right sole. These were not mine. Bare feet, smallish, but not a child's. They began about 10 feet from the front door. That was the first thing that made my skin go cold. They did not come from the woods toward the station. They started in the clearing, as if someone had simply appeared there. The footprints led away from the building in a straight line, crossing the dirt and frost toward the tree line. I followed them with my eyes until they vanished into the pines. There were no prints coming back, no tire tracks, no sign of another person. I was 40 miles from the nearest paved road, and I had not seen another human being in 4 days. I stood there until the cold started hurting my fingers. Then I went back to work. I finished the job, at least enough to satisfy the contract. I patched what I could, secured what needed securing, and wrote up the list of major repairs the building still required. I did not mention the hidden room I did not mention the box. I did not mention the footprints. When I drove out, the box was in the back of my truck. I never handed it over. I never told anyone what I found. Not until now. For almost 30 years, I have carried that box with me. I moved twice in that time, and each time it came with me. I kept it in closets, garages, storage rooms. Sometimes I went years without opening it. Then something would happen. A news story, a missing hiker, a strange detail in an article, boots found beside a trail, a person discovered miles from where they should have been. Then I would open the box again. I have read most of the files now. Not all at once. I could never do it that way. Too many names, too many families, too many repeating details that make my hands feel cold even in summer. There are patterns. The boots, yes, the impossible distances. People found across rivers they never could have crossed. Children found on ridges too steep for them to climb. Search dogs losing scent suddenly, then refusing to continue. Victims who return unable to remember anything except stone walls, cold air, and the sound of someone walking barefoot behind them. And the caves. That is another thing. Caves appear in the files again and again, even when there are not supposed to be caves nearby. Survivors mention openings in rock, narrow passages, voices coming from below ground. Some rangers wrote notes in the margins about unmarked cave systems, then crossed them out. Others simply wrote, "Do not pursue cave angle," as if someone above them had instructed them to stop. I found letters too. Rangers trying to send reports up the chain, rangers angry that their incidents were being rewritten, rangers warning one another privately. One line appears in 3 different files from 3 different states, written by 3 different men across a span of 20 years. Leave the boots where they are. I do not know what that means. I do not know who started collecting the files. I do not know why they were hidden in that station. I do not know if the Park Service officially knew or if this was something passed quietly from one head ranger to the next by people who wanted the truth preserved but not exposed. Maybe both. People are still going missing every year in the same kinds of places. Deep woods, high country, remote trails, national parks, state forests, places where the land is old enough to have secrets and large enough to keep them. Most cases have ordinary explanations. People fall, people get lost, weather changes, animals attack. Human beings are fragile in the wilderness. But not all of them. Some reports still have the old shape. The camp intact, the gear untouched, the search area impossible, the person gone. The boots left behind, placed neatly waiting for someone to notice what they mean. I am old now, older than I thought I would be when I first opened that box. I have no children, no one to leave it to, and I am tired of being the only person I know who has seen what is inside. So I started recording myself reading through the files. All of them, in order. I am changing names. I am changing locations. I am changing dates when I have to. Some families are still alive. Some may still be searching in their own way. I do not want to hurt them more than they have already been hurt. But the stories themselves stay. Because someone should know. Someone should hear what was hidden. Someone should understand that there are records of these things, even if those records were never meant to be filed. I do not know if anyone will listen to the recordings. I do not know if they will believe me. Part of me hopes they don't, because believing means carrying the weight of it. Believing means that the next time you are in the woods and the trail goes quiet, you will look down at your boots and wonder if you should keep walking. But the record has to exist somewhere beyond that hidden room. Somewhere it cannot be stamped in red ink and buried behind a wall. These are the buried archives. And if you ever find a pair of boots in the wilderness placed neatly beside a tent, a trail, a bedroll, or the mouth of a cave, do not touch them. Do not move them. Do not put them on. And if you hear bare feet walking behind you in the dark, do not turn around. Just keep your boots on and walk until you find the road. Story 3. Aspen had been in our family for as long as I could remember. When I was little, I did not understand that there was anything strange about him. Children accept the world as it is handed to them. If there is a tiny boy with wings trapped inside a glass jar on your mother's desk, then that is simply part of the house, like the old clock in the hallway or the vase of fake flowers on the kitchen table. I knew Aspen was not normal, of course. I knew other kids did not have fairies sitting in jars in their homes. But I was 5 years old, and at 5, strange things still felt possible. My first clear memory of him is from a rainy afternoon. I was standing in my mother's office holding the bell jar between both hands, pressing my face close to the glass. The jar was never cold. That was the first thing I noticed. It was always warm, as if something inside it gave off its own little heat. It was light, too. Lighter than glass should have been, like holding a feather or a soap bubble. Inside the jar was a tiny boy. He had messy brown hair, almost the same shade as mine, except his was tangled with tiny flowers, bits of moss, and poison ivy. The plants seemed to grow through it, curling around the strands like they belonged there. His skin was pale, but not sickly. It had a faint golden glow when the light hit it. From his back came 2 wings, thin and delicate, almost transparent. They looked like wet paper, or dragonfly wings, shining with little colors when he moved. I remember my breath catching every time they fluttered. He was sitting at the bottom of the jar when I found him on my mother's desk. "What is he?" I whispered, excited and afraid at the same time. My mother looked up from her papers. For one moment, her face changed. It was quick, so quick I almost missed it. Her eyes sharpened and her mouth tightened. Then she smiled. "His name is Aspen," she said. She gently took the bell jar from my hands and placed it back on her desk. Inside, Aspen tried to stand, his little hands pressed against the glass, and his wings beat weakly behind him. He slipped, fell onto his knees, and tried again. "Do not remove the lid, Isabella," my mother said. She only called me Isabella when she wanted me to listen. I looked up at her. Why? Her hand moved through my ponytail, stroking my hair in the soft, comforting way she used whenever she wanted to calm me down. But I could not stop staring at Aspen. He had given up trying to stand. He was sitting with his head buried in his arms, his shoulders shaking slightly. "Do you understand me?" Mom asked. I pulled away from her hand, a lump forming in my throat. "But why is Aspen in the jar?" Mom chuckled, but there was something wrong with the sound. It was too light, too forced. She picked up the bell jar and shook it. Aspen's body rolled against the glass, his mouth opened in a silent O like he was screaming, but no sound came through. His wings crumpled beneath him, and one tiny hand slapped against the side of the jar. "See?" Mom said with a smile. "He's singing Bell." I wish I could say I cried for him, or that I understood even then that something awful was happening. But I was 5. I went back to my dolls. I built a house out of pillows in the living room. I forgot about Aspen for the rest of the day, the way children forget things when adults tell them not to worry. But I always remembered him eventually. As I grew up, I became more and more curious about the fairy in my mother's office. Mom did not keep him in the same place all the time. Sometimes he was on her desk, hidden behind stacks of files. Sometimes he was in a drawer. Sometimes he disappeared for weeks, and I would wonder if she had thrown him away or let him go. Then I would catch a glimpse of the bell jar again, tucked behind books or buried under folders, and relief would fill me. I did not talk about him with anyone, not my friends, not my teachers, not even my brother, Nick. Some part of me knew Aspen was a secret. My mother never said those words, but she did not have to. Every time I looked at the jar for too long, she watched me. Every time I got too close to it, she moved it away. When I was 10, I stayed home sick from school with a fever. Mom had to go to work for a few hours, and she told me to rest on the couch, drink water, and not touch anything in her office. The moment I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I got up. I was still dizzy, my head full of heat and pressure. But I went straight to her office. Aspen was not on the desk. He was not in the top drawer either. I searched through the shelves, behind books, inside cabinets, and under papers until I found him shoved in one of her filing cabinets, trapped between old dog-eared files with long names I could not understand. I grabbed the bell jar and lifted it carefully. Dust coated the glass. I wiped it away with the sleeve of my pajamas. Aspen's face appeared. I almost dropped him. He was older. The first time I saw him, he had looked like a tiny child. Now he looked my age, maybe 10 or 11, but still small enough to fit inside the jar. His hair had grown longer and more tangled. His wings looked bent in places. His face was thinner than I remembered, and his eyes were sharp and bright, too bright for something so small. He pressed both hands against the glass when he saw me. His mouth moved quickly. I could not hear him, but I could read some of it. "Where were you?" He gestured wildly, pointing at me, then at himself, then at the lid. I smiled because I did not know what else to do. "Sorry," I whispered. "Mom gets mad when I talk to you." He slapped the glass with one hand. His knuckles were split and red. That was when I noticed his fists were bloodied, the tiny skin torn from hitting the jar again and again. I pretended not to see the tears in his eyes. I carried the jar to the rug and lay on my stomach, balancing him carefully in my hands. The jar was dusty, and I wiped the lid with my sleeve. Aspen had grown noticeably thinner over the years. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes too large in his face. His hair hung in knots down his back, tangled in his wings so badly that some strands looked painful. I reached for my Barbie scissors. "I can fix your hair," I said. The moment he saw the scissors, Aspen's eyes widened so much I thought they might pop out of his head. "No," he mouthed. He stumbled backward and fell onto his butt, then scrambled away from the glass as if my tiny plastic scissors were a knife. I laughed. I thought he was being dramatic. "Come on, you need a haircut." "Belle," he mouthed, pointing at his hair, "you wouldn't dare." That made me laugh even harder. I didn't cut it, though. Something in the way he looked at me stopped me. There was fear there, real fear. Not the silly kind kids show when they are playing. So I put the scissors down. For a little while, we just looked at each other. I had never spent that long with him before. Usually, Mom came in and took him away. But that day, the house was quiet, and Aspen seemed calmer once he realized I was not going to hurt him. He sat cross-legged at the bottom of the jar, resting his chin on his fist. His wings twitched every now and then. For the first time, he smiled at me. That smile made me feel like we were friends. "Aspen," I said softly, "why does my mom keep you in a jar?" His smile vanished. Slowly, he stood up. He pressed one finger to the inside of the glass. There was condensation there, a faint fog from his breath or whatever warmth lived inside the jar. He began tracing a word into it, one letter at a time. Prisoner. Prisoner. My stomach turned cold. "Belle?" My mother's voice came from the hallway. I jumped so hard I nearly knocked the jar over. "I'll get you out," I whispered quickly. Aspen's hands pressed flat against the glass. His eyes were wide and desperate. "Belle, what are you doing in there?" Mom called. I shoved the bell jar onto the shelf, then tried to push it back into the cabinet. But my hands were shaking. Mom walked in before I could hide it properly. Her face went still when she saw me crouched there. "What did I tell you about touching my things?" she asked. I was just looking. Her eyes moved to the jar. Aspen had curled into himself, face hidden. Mom walked over and took the jar from the shelf. "Go to your room," she said. "But now." I went. After that, she changed the lock code on the cabinet. I tried to guess it for weeks, but I never got it right. Eventually, life moved on. School got harder. Friends came and went. I became a teenager. I started worrying about my clothes, my grades, my body, my face, my future, but I never forgot Aspen. Every now and then, I would dream of him. In the dreams, he was still inside the jar, tapping on the glass. Sometimes he was crying, Sometimes he had no wings. When I was 17, Mom made a mistake. She was in the kitchen, late for a meeting, juggling her phone, purse, and keys. She asked me to grab her laptop from the office and, without thinking, gave me the code to the cabinet because she thought the laptop charger might be inside. She said the numbers once. I repeated them silently in my head until they burned there. After she left, I waited maybe 10 minutes. Then I went to the office. My heart was racing. I kept expecting her to come back through the front door, or for some alarm to go off, or for the house itself to stop me. But nothing happened. The office was quiet, sunlight fell through the blinds in thin lines across her desk. Everything looked normal. I keyed in the code. The lock clicked. Aspen, I whispered. I pulled the cabinet open and searched through the files. He was not there. I checked her drawers, the shelves, the boxes under the desk. Nothing. Panic started to rise in me. What if he was dead? What if she had moved him somewhere else? What if she had finally gotten rid of him? Then I checked the closet. At the very back, behind old coats and storage boxes, I found the bell jar. It was covered in thick dust and grime. The glass was so dirty I could barely see through it. I grabbed it with both hands and almost dropped it. It was cold. Aspen's jar had never been cold before. I carried it into the light and wiped the glass with my palm. Aspen was inside, but he was no longer a tiny boy. He looked grown now, or as grown as someone his size could look. His body was cramped in the jar, knees bent awkwardly. His wings had expanded and pressed against the glass, folded and twisted because there was not enough room. Around him were cruel vines, dark green and thorn, wrapping his arms, legs, chest, and wings. They pinned him down like living ropes. My mother had restrained him. A rush of anger filled me. Not childish curiosity this time. Real anger. Real horror. Whatever Aspen was, whatever my mother had told herself, he had been trapped for years. He had begged me for help when we were children. I had left him there. "I'm sorry," I whispered. His eyes were closed. For one terrible moment, I thought he was dead. I took a deep breath and wrapped my fingers around the lid. Then I pulled it off. The air inside the jar rushed out with a smell like wet leaves, old flowers, and something sharp underneath. I reached in carefully, breaking apart the vines with my fingers. The thorns cut me, but I barely felt them. I freed his arms, then his legs, then gently pulled the vines away from his wings. At first, nothing happened. Aspen did not move. I leaned closer, peering into the jar. Aspen, his eyes opened. The next second, the room exploded with the sound of wings. He shot out of the jar so fast I screamed and dropped it. He flew past my face, a blur of brown hair and glittering wings, then disappeared through the office door into the hallway. "Aspen," I shouted. I ran after him, panic twisting in my stomach. I had imagined freeing him would be gentle. I thought he would thank me, or at least explain. I had not expected him to fly through the house like a trapped wasp. "Mom?" I yelled, without thinking. Mom? I stopped when I reached the kitchen. My mother was gone. At first, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. There was a pile on the floor near the table. Clothes. Bones. A few wet strands of hair. Her blouse had been shredded into ribbons. Her wedding ring lay near the sink, still on one finger bone. I screamed. Not a full scream. More like my body tried to make one and failed. I stumbled backward, tears already filling my eyes. "Nick," I shouted. My brother was home. He had to be. He had been in his room earlier playing games with headphones on. "Nick? Bell?" He was 16, only a year younger than me, still in sweatpants and an old t-shirt. He looked confused and scared. Then he melted. There is no other word for it. His skin began to sag and drip from his bones like wax too close to a flame. His eyes bulged, then slipped from their sockets with a wet sound that made me gag. His mouth opened, but whatever sound he tried to make became a thick, bubbling gurgle. His knees gave out and he collapsed onto the carpet as his skull softened and caved inward. I stared at him, frozen. My mother, Nick, Aspen. I understood only one thing. I had let him out, and now my family was dying. Aspen, I screamed. He flashed past me, a tiny dark shape with wings darting toward the living room ceiling. I ran to the closet near the back door and grabbed an old fly net we used to use when bees got into the house. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Aspen was fast, but he was small, and the house was full of walls. He circled the living room light, laughing. The sound was tiny but sharp. It cut through the house like broken glass. I swung the net once and missed. He zipped behind a curtain. I swung again and knocked over a lamp. Then he came too close, diving toward my face, and I thrust the net upward. I caught him. His body hit the mesh with a buzzing cry. He twisted and fought, wings beating furiously against the netting. I slammed the net down onto the floor. "Aspen," I sobbed. "What did you do?" He screamed at me. I could hear him now, not clearly, but enough. His voice was high, furious, and full of hate. I lifted my shoe. For 1 second, I saw him as he had been when I was 5. A tiny boy in a jar, wings like raindrops, trapped and silent. Then I saw my mother's bones on the kitchen floor. I brought my foot down. His scream exploded into a raw, painful cry. I stepped on him again. Blood splattered across the floor, dark and bright at the same time. His wings crumpled. His tiny body jerked under my shoe. I raised my foot to finish it. That was when he laughed. It startled me so badly I stumbled back. Aspen lay twisted on the floor, blood on his mouth. One wing bent beneath him, but he was smiling, not with relief, not with pain, with triumph. My hands started to hurt. I looked down. The skin on my fingers was splitting. At first, I thought I had cut myself on the glass or the vines. Then the joints began to loosen. My fingers bent wrong. Beneath the skin, I felt the bones shifting apart, separating as if something that had been holding them together had suddenly let go. A cold wave of terror went through me. "No," I whispered. Aspen giggled, coughing blood. I dropped to my knees and picked him up carefully. His body was limp in my palm. I straightened one of his wings without thinking, like I could undo what I had done. I wiped blood from his mouth with my thumb. His grin widened. "Bitch," he said, his voice cracked and wild. Then he broke into hysterical little giggles. "Your mom's been using me to keep your family alive." I stared at him. "What?" He spat blood onto my face. "Did you really think she kept me in that jar for fun?" he hissed. "Did you think she was just cruel?" My hands were still coming apart. Pain shot through my wrists. I could feel my bones shifting under the skin like loose sticks in a bag. Aspen's eyes glittered. "Your family should have died years ago," he said. "Your mother made a deal. She trapped me. She used me every day, every year. She pulled life out of me and fed it into you." I shook my head. "No." "Yes," he said. "You, your brother, her, all of you. Little stolen lives walking around in borrowed skin." I could barely breathe. Memories flashed through my mind. My mother shaking the jar when I was 5. Aspen's silent scream. The files in the cabinet. The locked code. The vines. The dust. The cold. My mother's fear whenever I got too close. "She kept us alive," I whispered. "She kept you alive with me," Aspen said. "And now you tried to kill me." My knees weakened. From the hallway came a wet sound. I turned and saw what remained of Nick sinking deeper into the carpet. The sight almost broke me. Aspen folded his arms, though one of them hung at a bad angle. Somehow, even broken and bloody, he looked in control. "Kill me," he said, smiling, "and you die too." My teeth began to ache. My jaw popped. I pressed one hand against my face, terrified it would come away with skin. "What do you want?" I asked. Aspen's smile became feral. "That's better," he said. I held him in both hands, afraid to squeeze too hard, afraid not to. My body was still unraveling, but slowly now, like he had paused it just to enjoy my fear. "What do you want?" I asked again, crying. Aspen looked toward the kitchen, where my mother's bones lay among the torn pieces of her clothes. For a moment, his expression changed. There was hatred there, yes, but something else too. Something old. Something wounded. "She stole years from me," he said softly. "She cut my wings when they grew too wide. She fed me sugar water and lies. She buried me in drawers and cabinets in darkness. She made me listen to you grow up while I stayed trapped in glass." "I didn't know," I whispered. His eyes snapped back to mine. "You knew enough." I had no answer, because he was right. Maybe I had not known the whole truth. Maybe I had not known about the deal or the stolen life holding my family together. But I had known he was trapped. I had seen the word he wrote in the fogged glass when we were children. Prisoner. And I had left him there. Aspen's wings buzzed weakly in my hands. "So now," he said, "we're going to play my game." "What game?" He leaned forward, blood shining on his tiny teeth. "The same one your mother played," he said. "Only this time I make the rules." The lights in the house flickered. It sounded like vines growing through pipes, like roots pushing through wood. The air filled with the smell of wet leaves and old soil. In the kitchen, my mother's bones rattled softly. In the hallway, what was left of Nick gave a low, bubbling breath. Aspen looked at me and smiled. "First rule," he said, "put me back in the jar and I let what remains of your family stay dead." My heart stopped. "What?" "Second rule," he whispered, "keep me free and I can show you how to build them again." I looked toward the hallway where my brother had fallen apart, then toward the kitchen, then back at Aspen. The skin of my hands were still split, my bones still loose beneath it. My life, or whatever had been pretending to be my life, hung from this tiny ruined creature in my palms. Aspen laughed softly. "Choose carefully, Belle," he said. "Your mother did." And behind him, on the office floor, the empty bell jar waited with its lid beside it, warm once again. Story 4. This happened a couple of years ago when I was in college. I was a sophomore and I lived off campus in an apartment with 3 other guys. It wasn't a great place. Old, drafty, always one minor problem away from falling apart. But it was what we could afford. Rent was cheap and in a college town that mattered more than anything else. My bedroom was upstairs on the 2nd floor, all the way at the end of the hall. The house had that long, narrow layout where every step sounds louder than it should. My room had a window that faced the side of the neighboring house, maybe 8 feet away. It was close enough that if you leaned forward, you could see into their windows. But it didn't matter much because their windows were always dark. For the longest time, I honestly thought nobody lived there. Then, every once in a while, I'd see an older man outside taking out the trash. He wasn't friendly, but he also wasn't obviously threatening. Just an older guy, quiet, kept to himself, moved slowly. I never saw visitors, never saw lights change, never heard a TV through the wall. Just him, sometimes, and then long stretches where the house looked completely empty again. The weird stuff started with my alarm. For about a week, I kept waking up 5 or 10 minutes before my alarm went off. It was annoying, but it didn't feel creepy. I figured it was stress, or my body getting used to final season creeping closer, or maybe I was just sleeping lightly because the house was so noisy. Our place had constant background sounds, pipes clicking, the fridge rattling, the heater coming on like it was coughing itself awake. So I didn't really question it. I just started getting irritated because it felt like my own brain was stealing sleep from me. Then one night I woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m. because my phone screen lit up the room. It wasn't ringing. It wasn't vibrating. It was just on, bright, like someone had woken it up and left it staring at me. I sat up, squinting, and picked it up. My alarm app was open. The alarm that was normally set for 7:30 a.m. had been changed to 3:17. I remember sitting there with my phone in my hand, trying to replay the night in my head. Had I messed with it? Had I half woken up and done it without remembering? I'd done stuff like that before. Reply to a text and not remember it, turn off an alarm in my sleep and wake up later confused. It happens. So I told myself that's what this was. Sleep brain. Nothing else. The next night, just to be safe, I put my phone under my pillow at 3:17 a.m. I woke up again. This time it wasn't because of the phone. It was because I heard a noise. At first, I tried to ignore it. When you live near a campus, you get used to random sounds at night. People coming home from bars, someone shouting down the street, a car door slamming, laughter, footsteps. My first thought was just drunk kids outside. Then I heard 3 soft knocks downstairs. Not loud banging, not someone pounding on the front door. 3 distinct knocks, like someone tapping on wood. I froze in bed. Our apartment was never truly silent. Even at night, there was always something. A pipe tick, a roommate snoring, the low whoosh of a car passing. But after those knocks, the house felt too quiet, like the background noise had paused. A second later, I heard a floorboard creak downstairs. I grabbed my phone and texted our group chat. Is anyone up? No one answered. I checked everyone's location out of habit. Snapchat makes it way too easy to do that without thinking. None of them had been active for at least 2 hours. That didn't mean they were asleep, but it meant nobody was walking around with their phone. I slid out of bed and crouched next to my bedroom door, holding my phone like it could protect me. I listened hard. Nothing. I cracked my door open and looked into the hallway. Josh's door was slightly open, and I could hear him snoring. Dylan's door was the same, cracked open, quiet except for that steady sleep sound. Jake's room was empty because he stayed at his girlfriend's place most nights. So if no one was awake and no one was downstairs, what had made the knocks? I told myself it was the house settling. Old buildings make weird sounds, but I still couldn't let it go, so I walked down the stairs as quietly as I could. That was when I noticed the basement door was open. We never left it open. The basement was unfinished and gross, damp in a way that made the air feel wrong. The kind of place where you don't want to think too hard about what might be living behind the walls. We used it for storage and laundry and nothing else. And we kept the door closed because the cold smell from down there would creep into the living room. I stood at the top of the basement stairs, staring down into the dark. I waited to hear breathing, movement, nothing. I closed the basement door, then, because I had no better ideas and my brain was in full dumb survival mode, I dragged a chair in front of it like that meant anything. Then I went back upstairs and tried to sleep, even though I didn't really sleep. I just lay there and listened to every sound the house made, jumping at anything that didn't match the usual pattern. The next morning, I told Josh what happened. He laughed, barely looking up from his cereal, and said, "Dude, it's probably your melatonin. That stuff gives you weird dreams." And if nothing else had happened, I might have accepted that. I might have decided it was a one-time scare. But 2 nights later, we were all on the couch watching TV around midnight when we heard it again. 3 soft, distinct knocks. This time, it came from inside the basement. Josh muted the TV so fast the silence felt harsh. The 3 of us just sat there, staring at the basement door like we were waiting for it to grow teeth. Then it happened again. Knock, knock, knock. Josh whispered, "Is Dylan down there?" Dylan was sitting on the couch behind us. He lifted his hands like, obviously not. None of us moved for a while, then Josh did what guys always do when they're scared and don't want to admit it. He grabbed a kitchen knife like it was a sword and acted like he was irritated, not nervous. He opened the basement door. The light switch was at the top of the stairs. Josh flipped it on. The bulb flickered twice and then stayed lit. The basement looked normal. Washer and dryer, Cardboard boxes, old paint cans, that small, grimy window near the ground, everything exactly where it should have been. Then Dylan said quietly, "Why is there a chair down there?" At the bottom of the stairs, facing up toward us, was one of our dining room chairs. None of us had put it there. That chair should have been upstairs, around the table. But it was down there like someone had carried it into the basement and placed it carefully. And it wasn't just sitting anywhere. It was positioned to face the stairs, like it was meant for someone to sit in it and look up at the basement door. We didn't sleep much that night. We kept checking the locks. We kept talking in circles about possible explanations. We kept trying to laugh it off and failing. The next morning, we called the landlord. He barely listened. He gave us the usual line about old houses making noise and pipes knocking and everything shifting with temperature changes. When we mentioned the chair, he sounded annoyed and said maybe one of us had been sleepwalking. None of us were sleepwalkers. None of us had ever done anything like that before. Still, we didn't have proof. And proof matters if you want anyone to take you seriously. After that, we locked the basement door from the outside with a cheap latch from the hardware store. It wasn't fancy, just enough to stop the door from opening unless someone had the key or physically ripped it off. For about a week, nothing happened. Finals came closer and we all got busy. The fear dulled, not because it went away, but because stress takes up space. When you're thinking about papers and exams and your grades slipping, your brain gets tired of being scared all the time. One night I came home late from the library. It was snowing lightly, and I remember being in a weirdly good mood. Campus was quiet and pretty. The snow made everything feel softer, like the world had turned down its volume. When I got to the apartment, the front door was unlocked. Not open, just unlocked. I stood there with my hand on the knob, staring at it like I'd forgotten how doors worked. I knew I had locked it when I left because I always did this stupid habit of lifting the door slightly as I turned the key, because the frame was warped and sometimes the lock didn't catch if you didn't. I stepped inside. All the lights were off. The house was cold, quiet. "Hello?" I called, half hoping someone would answer, half terrified someone would. No answer. I checked my roommates' locations. Josh was at the bar. Dylan was at work. Jake was across town at his girlfriend's place. I turned on every light on the first floor, moving fast, trying to make the house feel normal again. Then I saw it on the kitchen counter. My phone charger that doesn't sound scary until I explain what it meant. I'd lost that charger 3 weeks earlier. I'd looked everywhere, under the bed, desk drawers, backpack pockets, laundry pile, couch cushions. Gone, I'd ended up buying a cheap replacement because I finally accepted it was missing for good. Now it was sitting in the middle of the counter like someone was returning it. It was wrapped neatly around itself like it had been carefully packed away. Next to it was a folded piece of paper. I didn't want to touch it. I stood there staring at it, waiting for it to move like it was alive. Finally, I grabbed it with 2 fingers and unfolded it. It said, "Stop locking it." That was when I called the police. They came and did a walkthrough. They checked doors and windows. They checked closets. They checked the basement. No sign of forced entry. No broken locks. No busted windows. And the cheap latch we'd installed on the basement door was still locked exactly the way we'd left it. They told me, politely, that it could be one of my roommates messing with me, or that we should consider buying a camera if we were worried. So we did. We bought 2 cheap motion cameras. One faced the front door, one faced the basement door. For 3 nights, nothing happened. On the 4th night, the basement camera went offline at 3:16 a.m. I noticed because I couldn't sleep well anymore, and I'd gotten into the habit of checking my phone whenever I woke up. When I saw the camera was offline, my stomach tightened immediately. Then, at 3:17 a.m., my phone lit up. Not an alarm, a notification. Motion detected. Front door. I opened the clip with shaking fingers. The video showed our front door opening from the inside. No one walked out. No silhouette crossing the frame. The door just opened slowly, stayed open for about 20 seconds, then started to close. My first thought was that the lock had failed. Old door, bad frame, maybe wind pressure. I tried to force my brain into normal explanations, but then I watched it again. Right before the door closed, I saw it. A hand. Just a hand. Pale, thin, gripping the edge of the door from inside the house, pulling it shut. There was no full body in the frame. Just that hand appearing and disappearing in the gap like it belonged to someone standing just out of view. I got out of bed so fast I nearly fell. I ran down the hall and pounded on Josh and Dylan's doors. When they stumbled out, half asleep and angry, I shoved the phone in their faces and made them watch. The mood changed instantly. We searched the house together, every room, every closet, checking under beds like we were 12. We checked the basement door latch, still locked. We checked windows, still shut. We found nothing. After that, we didn't argue about what it meant anymore. We didn't sit around trying to rationalize it. We all knew we were done. We moved out that week, not officially because the lease was still active and none of us had the money to just break it cleanly. But we stopped sleeping there. We stayed at friends' places, couches, spare rooms, anywhere. We only came back during the day to pack our stuff while the sun was out. And even then, we didn't come alone. The landlord was furious at first. He talked about the lease like it was the only real thing in the world. Then Josh's dad got involved, mentioned legal action, and suddenly the landlord's attitude changed. He got cooperative fast, the way people do when they're scared of paperwork in court. About a month later, Jake found something online. He'd been searching for reviews, trying to see if anyone else had complained about the place, thinking maybe we weren't the first. Instead, he found something worse. Our rental had a crawl space behind the basement wall. From what I understood, it had been sealed years earlier after plumbing work. But there was still access from the neighboring house because the two buildings used to share some old coal chute or storage space back when the neighborhood was built. I don't know every detail. I just know what the police eventually confirmed. Someone could get from the neighbor's basement into ours through a narrow hidden space behind the washer. The police came back after the landlord finally admitted there was an access panel. Inside the crawl space, they found signs someone had been living there, blankets, food wrappers, empty water bottles, a small battery-powered light, and my missing hoodie. That hoodie hit me harder than I expected, because it meant the person wasn't just passing through. They were close enough, often enough, to take things and keep them. They were close enough to watch our routines, learn what we locked, learn what time we slept. And that older man next door, the one I'd seen taking out the trash once in a while, seemed to vanish. I never saw him again, not at his usual times, not ever. When I told the police, they said the house was vacant. No one officially lived there. Nobody could tell me who the old man was or where he went. The landlord claimed he had no idea any of it was possible. Maybe that was true, maybe it wasn't. But the part I still think about the most isn't the hand on the camera or the note on the counter. It's the chair. Because whoever was in our basement didn't just sneak in to steal a charger or a hoodie. They carried a chair downstairs and set it at the bottom of the stairs, facing up toward the door. Like they wanted us to know they were there. Like they wanted us to hear the knocks. Like they wanted to sit in the dark and wait for one of us to come down alone. And that's what still gets me, even now, years later. Not the mystery of it, the intention of it. I don't know how close I came to actually meeting the person who's living behind our walls. I don't know what would have happened if I'd gone down those stairs at 3:17 a.m. instead of closing the door and putting a chair in front of it upstairs like an idiot. I'm just grateful I never found out. I haven't heard much about that place since then. Last I checked, as of May 2026, that apartment still hadn't been renovated. It's still being rented out like nothing ever happened, like it's just another cheap college place with creaky floors and bad heat. And maybe that's the scariest part, how easily a story like this can disappear, while the building stays exactly where it is, waiting for the next group of broke students to move in and tell themselves it's fine. Story 5. Every town has its own secrets. Not the harmless kind, like who's having an affair or which neighbor is stealing packages. I mean the darker stuff. The kind people don't talk about because saying it out loud makes it feel real. Most towns do whatever they can to keep that darkness buried, especially when outsiders are around. I've always been the opposite. I like dragging hidden things into the light. I like questions that don't have clean answers. I like the uncomfortable feeling that something is wrong, because it means there's something to figure out. That's why I joined a local true crime club here in Salt Lake. We call it the Mystery Den. It's not official, not some fancy organization with dues and rules. It's just a group of people who meet up to talk about cases that never get much media attention. Missing people nobody outside the city remembers. Unsolved murders that got filed away. Strange 911 calls. Weird patterns that don't get followed up. And yeah, sometimes we talk about conspiracy theories and the occasional cryptid sighting because once you start digging into the darker corners of life, you realize how thin the line is between reality and the stuff people insist can't be real. If you asked a normal person what we do, they'd probably call it unhealthy, morbid, maybe even disrespectful. But if you live in a city that feels quiet and predictable, you start craving something that makes your pulse jump. Something that reminds you you're alive. For a long time, I thought Salt Lake was boring. I don't think that anymore. There's a daycare here that almost everyone has heard of, but nobody seems to understand. It's called Funtime Kids Cara, spelled exactly like that. It's been around for decades. The first time someone mentioned it to me, I assumed it was just another small business with a stupid name. But then I realized something strange. Nobody I spoke to remembered ever seeing children go in or out. Not once. No parents dropping kids off. No minivans in the morning. No tired moms picking their kids up in the afternoon. And when you walk by, you don't hear anything. No laughing, no screaming, no crying, no muffled chaos. Just silence. The building itself looks like it was designed to make you uncomfortable. It's painted this bright, ugly green, like someone tried to choose the happiest color and failed. The window frames are yellow, the doors are purple, and every window is covered so you can't see inside. No curtains you can peek around. No gaps. Just blocked out glass like the place is trying to hide from the street. It doesn't feel like a daycare, it feels like a set. Like a fake front someone built because they needed the word daycare on the sign. It became one of those local mysteries that lives in the background. People mention it, laugh a little, then change the subject. But once I noticed it, I couldn't stop noticing it. Every time I passed it, I slowed down. Every time I was near that part of town, I found reasons to walk by. Eventually, I started asking questions. One day, I talked to a postal worker. Casual at first, like I wasn't about to make it weird. I asked him if he'd ever delivered mail to Funtime Kids Care. He made a face, like he didn't like thinking about it, then said yes, he'd delivered there a few times. And then he told me the detail that really stuck. He said there really were kids inside. He knew because he'd heard them. Not playing, not talking, breathing. Little sounds. But here's the part that made no sense. It was always nap time when he arrived. Mail carriers don't show up at one exact hour every day. Their schedules change. Routes shift. Traffic happens. This guy told me he'd been there early in the morning and later in the afternoon, and every single time the building felt the same. Quiet. Dim. And the kids were always asleep. Not calm. Not resting. Fully out. Like they'd been sedated. He laughed when he said it, like it was just a creepy coincidence. But he didn't sound amused. He sounded uneasy. He admitted it had bothered him enough that he tried knocking louder once, just to see if anyone would respond like a normal daycare would. Someone always eventually came to the door, took the mail, and ended it fast. No small talk, no friendly smile, just a hand appearing, a signature, and a shut door. After that conversation, my mind went wild. I couldn't help it. If kids were always asleep, no matter what time it was, that meant something. Maybe it was just a strict schedule. Maybe the building had terrible soundproofing and you only heard them during naps. But the more I considered it, the less that explanation worked. What if the rumors were right? What if it wasn't a daycare at all? I brought it up at the next Mystery Den meeting. People reacted instantly, like I'd hit a nerve. Some of them had their own stories. Some had driven by and noticed the same things. Some had heard old rumors passed around like urban legends. We started throwing theories around, half joking and half serious. Human trafficking front, secret government program, a cult, a private school for something that wasn't education. We talked about it long enough that it stopped being a casual topic and became a plan. Someone suggested we make it the main subject of our next podcast episode. A full deep dive, interviews, photos, maybe even some recordings from outside the building at night. That should have been where it ended. A creepy story, a few theories, a warning to parents to stay away. Content for an audience that likes chills and mysteries. But I didn't want a story. I wanted the truth. So I did something reckless. One night I went back with another club member. I'm not going to use his real name here because I'm not sure who reads what online and I'm not sure who might be connected to that building. I'll just call him my partner. We wore black clothes. We covered our faces with balaclavas. Not because we planned to hurt anyone, but because we were doing something illegal and we didn't want cameras catching us. We told ourselves it was investigative. We told ourselves we were doing it for the kids, if there were kids. But the honest truth is that we were bored people chasing a thrill. And we were arrogant enough to think that made us brave. My partner had a lockpick kit. I had my phone flashlight and a small camera. The plan was simple. Get in, record as much as possible, get out, then decide what to do with what we found. When the lock finally clicked and the door opened, the first thing I noticed was the air. It didn't smell like a daycare. It didn't smell like crayons, cheap snacks, disinfectant, or kids. It smelled clean in a cold way, like a hospital hallway, like bleach used often enough that the building itself had absorbed it. Inside was nothing like the bright colors outside. It was sterile. The floors were spotless. The walls were plain, no child artwork, no alphabet posters, no cartoon animals smiling down from bulletin boards. No toys scattered in corners. It felt like a space someone had designed to look empty on purpose. We moved carefully, letting our eyes adjust. My phone flashlight made everything look harsher, shadows cutting sharp angles across the walls. Our footsteps sounded too loud. The building didn't creak like an old daycare. It just sat there, quiet and controlled. We found what looked like an office area first. Desks, filing cabinets, a few computers turned off. The kind of space you'd expect in a small business, except it didn't have personal touches. No coffee mugs, no calendars with cheesy jokes. Nothing that said a human being spent time there. Then we opened a cabinet. It was full of files, not the kind labeled emergency contacts or allergies. These were thick folders organized too neatly, and they had names on them. Children's names, judging by the ages listed. I remember the sick feeling I got seeing that, because it made it real. Real kids. Real records. Then we started reading. The language in those files didn't belong anywhere near children. Each folder talked about psychic potential, aptitude scores, performance metrics. It described tests the kids were given and how they responded. Some notes were clinical, like a doctor writing about symptoms. Others sounded almost excited, like whoever wrote them was proud. There were sections that made my skin crawl. Kids with low potential were described as disposed of. Some failed dramatically, leading to mental collapse and transfer to alternate facilities. The kids with high potential were called ascended beings, and there was one phrase I kept seeing that made my mouth go dry every time it showed up: prime candidates for the harvest. I remember looking at my partner, and I could tell from his eyes that he was thinking the same thing I was thinking. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't just a weird daycare. We had walked into something bigger than the rumors. We filmed everything. Shaky footage, sure, but readable. Names, notes, the language, The dates, proof that someone was tracking children like lab subjects. That's when I heard the sound. A low groan coming from a door to my left. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of sound you might mistake for pipes shifting in the walls. But it didn't repeat like plumbing. It had a shape to it, like someone forcing air through their throat. I froze with my hands still on the file. My partner whispered my name, telling me not to be stupid. I walked to the door anyway. When I opened it, I found a stairwell, concrete steps leading down into darkness. The basement. The smell hit me immediately. It came up from below like a wave, thick and raw. Not sewage, not mold, not rot in the usual sense. Something inhuman, like spoiled meat mixed with chemicals, like a place that had been cleaned too many times and still couldn't hide what happened there. It was bad enough that my eyes watered. I swallowed and felt bile rise in my throat. Then I heard a voice, faint, coming from deep down the stairs. "Help us," it whispered. "Let us out." I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs felt locked. "Please give us a second chance," the voice continued, barely audible, like it didn't have the strength to be louder. "We'll pass the test this time." I missed my parents. A child. It sounded like a child, not like an adult pretending, not like a recording. Like a real kid speaking softly because they were afraid of being heard. My partner grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt and pulled me back. I didn't argue. I didn't even think. We ran. We didn't bother closing doors quietly or keeping our steps soft. We just got out of the building, got into the street, and kept moving until the air felt safe again. We made an anonymous call to the police. We told them we had evidence. We didn't mention breaking in. We didn't mention the files. We just tried to get them to respond fast. Then we went back, close enough to see, far enough to hide. We stayed in the shadows and watched patrol cars roll up, lights flashing over that ugly green building. Officers went inside. We held our breath, waiting to see kids brought out, waiting to see medical crews, waiting to see anything that looked like rescue. The cops eventually came back out. There were no children with them, no stretchers, no crying kids wrapped in blankets, nothing. They talked to each other for a few minutes, calm as could be, then got back into their cars and left. They left the building exactly as it was. I know what I heard. I know it wasn't my imagination. The voice was too specific, too desperate. I miss my parents. That line plays in my head when I'm trying to sleep. After that night, nothing happened. No news report, no investigation I could find, no official statement. The daycare stayed open, or at least it stayed standing with the sign up like it had always been. The Mystery Den members called. Different ones, different days. Sometimes anonymous tips, sometimes straight complaints. No matter how many calls were made, nothing changed. It started to feel like the police weren't ignoring it because they didn't believe us. It felt like they were ignoring it because they already knew. That's the thought that keeps me awake. The idea that the people who are supposed to stop something like that might be part of it, or at least willing to protect it. Maybe not every officer, maybe not even most, but enough to make sure nothing gets looked at too closely. And I can't stop thinking about those files, about the kids labeled as low potential, about what disposed of actually meant in that building, about what kind of test would make a child beg for a second chance. Sometimes I tell myself that would have gotten us killed. Both thoughts can be true. I still think about going back. Not alone this time. With the entire club, with cameras, flashlights, maybe something to protect ourselves. The idea of rescuing anyone sounds dramatic when I say it out loud, like I'm pretending to be a hero in a story. But I heard that voice. And if there really are kids down there waiting in the dark, then leaving them there feels like the worst kind of cowardice. There's more to this. I'm sure of it. That building is still there, still sealed up, still quiet. And whatever is inside it has had decades to learn how to stay hidden. I don't know what we found that night. I only know it found us back. Story 6. Before anything else, I need to be clear. I am mentally sound. I have never been diagnosed with anything that would make me see things that aren't there, and I am not in the habit of imagining monsters to explain my mistakes. None of what I'm about to tell you is a hallucination or some stress dream my brain cooked up. I know what I saw. I know what I did. And I am not going to sit here and let strangers decide I'm crazy just because the truth is ugly. I gave 20 years to the job. I started as a rookie who still smelled like academy polish and cheap aftershave, and I worked my way up the hard way. I earned my badge in blood, sweat, and stubborn pride. I became a lead detective because I was good at seeing patterns and refusing to let cases die. I've dealt with real predators, real grief, real crime scenes that never leave your head. I know the difference between fear and fantasy. What I am, though, is a man who made a mistake that has been growing teeth inside my life for weeks, chewing through everything I thought I understood. And the worst part is that it happened when I was supposed to be winding down, when I was 6 months away from retirement and thinking about what kind of quiet I wanted. I should have been careful. I should have let the younger guys chase the shadows. I should have listened to the small voice that told me to leave certain things alone. But I didn't. Pride got there first. Pride always does. 6 months before I was supposed to turn in my gun and my badge, a photograph landed on my desk. Kaylee Everson, 2nd grade, school picture day. The image was one of those perfect little portraits that parents frame and grandparents put on the mantle. She was dressed up like she was going somewhere important. Her dirty blonde hair had been curled carefully, almost like a little pageant star, and she wore a light lavender sundress that made her look even younger than she was. On top of her head was a bright red bow, tied neatly like somebody took their time. She smiled with slightly crooked front teeth, the kind of smile kids have before adulthood teaches them to hide things. It wasn't just a photo to me. It was a record of a person who existed, who had a life and routines, and a family and a teacher who probably wrote her name on everything. My partner, Detective John Ripley, tossed the photo down on my desk like he was throwing away a losing hand. He ran a hand over the top of his head out of habit, a place where hair used to be years ago. "We got a sad one today, champ," he said, trying to make it sound like a joke. I took a drag from my cigarette, the last of it, and tapped ash into the tray. "When are they not, Ripley?" But as soon as I said it, I could tell this one was different. You can feel it sometimes. It settles into the room like weather. Ripley's face had that look he got when he was trying to act normal, but couldn't quite keep the edges from showing. "CCTV picked her up outside the corner store off Carter Street," he said. "She looked like she was wearing pajamas. And I'm not exactly an expert, but the kid looked confused as hell, like she didn't know where she was or how she got there." I stared at him for a second, choosing my words the way you do when you already know you won't like the answers. "Do we have the tape?" We kept an old player in the office because some places never upgraded their systems, and a surprising amount of evidence still showed up in outdated formats. He slid the tape in, hit play, and we watched together. He was right. Kaylee looked confused in a way that didn't feel like normal childhood wandering. She moved like someone dropped into the wrong place. Her head kept turning, eyes darting, searching for something familiar and not finding it. She was small in the frame, swallowed by the night and the wide sidewalk and the empty street. The timestamp in the corner read 3:18 a.m. That made my stomach tighten. Kids don't end up outside corner stores at 3:18 in the morning unless something has already gone terribly wrong. There was no parent in sight, no car pulling away, no adult shadow hovering nearby, just a little girl stumbling into the camera's view like she'd been placed there. At 3:25, she suddenly snapped her head behind her, sharp and fast, like she heard someone say her name. Then she turned her whole body slowly and started walking toward whatever had called her. Not running, not happy. Timid, like she didn't want to go but felt she had to. And then she left the camera's frame. That was the last anyone ever saw of her. Her parents were crushed. That doesn't even cover it. The school held a vigil. Candles, prayers, teachers crying with families they barely knew. Everyone begging the universe to bring her home. Ripley ejected the tape, and the two of us sat there, quiet, thinking through what to do next. To me, it was obvious you start where the last proof of life is. You go to the store on Carter Street. We drove there together without talking much. Carter Street sat in a part of town nobody bragged about. Not near Kaylee's neighborhood, not near any place a second grader should have been. When we pulled in, the lot was packed with people. Curious locals, reporters sniffing around. A few officers trying to hold a perimeter while everybody pretended they were just passing by. That kind of crowd makes real work impossible. Too many eyes, too many hands, too much noise. Ripley flashed his badge once, sharp and authoritative, and started clearing people out. It took a few minutes, but eventually the lot emptied enough for us to breathe. We would have started our sweep properly if the store owner hadn't been glued to us like a magnet. He hovered, asking questions every 5 minutes, desperate and annoying and scared all at once. Is the girl okay? Are you gonna be here tomorrow? He kept talking because silence made him nervous, and nervous people fill the air with sound. Ripley and I finally told him, politely but firmly, that we needed a moment alone to think. We stepped outside for a smoke break, partly to get away from him and partly because sometimes you need nicotine to keep your hands from shaking. Standing there in the cold, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a flash of red that didn't match the dirty gray and brown of everything else. I tossed my cigarette down and ground it out, then walked over to where the red was tucked away. Someone had stuffed it into the downspout beside the building, carefully, like they wanted it hidden but also wanted it found. As I got closer, my stomach started tying itself into knots because I already knew what it was before I touched it. I knelt and reached into the downspout. My fingers closed around fabric. When I pulled it out, Ripley gasped. A tiny red bow, the same bright red bow from Kaylee's school photo. My mouth went dry. Holy hell, I said before I could stop myself. Ripley crouched next to me, eyes wide. That's not what I think it is, unfortunately. But the real punch wasn't the bow. Pinned to it with a small clothing pin was a note, 3 words, written in neat adult handwriting. Do not look for me. It clearly wasn't Kaylee's writing. It was somebody else's hand guiding the message, and the message was meant for us, not for her parents, not for the public, for the people who would chase. Ripley called for backup right away. I stared at the bow like it might start speaking if I looked long enough. Within minutes, the place was crawling with uniforms and marked cars and techs pulling out gloves and evidence bags. Search teams that had been scattered around town all converged on Carter Street. The whole property got combed like it was sacred ground, every inch checked, every corner photographed, every bit of trash treated like it might be the thread that led to her. Hours passed, we found nothing else. Daylight faded again, and by early morning I was the only one left. Ripley had gone to file reports and coordinate with other teams. The store owner had long since been told to close and go home. The street was empty again, like the night had reset itself. I decided I had to sleep. I was no use to anyone running on fumes. If Kaylee was still alive and there was a chance to bring her back, I needed to be sharp, not half dead. The drive home was torture. Her face stayed in my mind the whole way, that school photo smile floating behind my eyes. I kept imagining her cold somewhere, hungry, calling out. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I realized I'd driven on autopilot, barely aware of the turns. I went straight to bed and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep like my brain shut itself off. At 9 a.m., I woke up to knocking on my front door. I rolled out of bed, irritated, still groggy, and went to the peephole. No one was there. I opened the door anyway, expecting maybe a neighbor messing around or Ripley stopping by without warning. Instead, I found a package sitting neatly on my welcome mat. That made my skin prickle. I hadn't ordered anything, not since last Christmas, and even then my ex-wife handled most of the deliveries. This box was plain. No label, no return address, no tape markings besides clean, careful strips. It weighed less than a pound when I picked it up. My instincts screamed that it was connected to the case. The timing was too perfect. The blank packaging felt intentional, like it was meant to slip through systems and leave nothing to trace. I decided not to open it in my house. I carried it to my car and drove toward the office, calling Ripley to tell him I was coming in. On the drive, curiosity gnawed at me. So did fear. Because if someone put this on my porch, they'd been close enough to touch my front door. They'd been close enough to watch my windows. That meant they knew where I lived. And if they knew where I lived, they could have followed me from Carter Street, or they could have known long before that. I tried to replay the night in my mind, trying to remember any car that followed too long, any figure standing under a streetlight, any odd feeling that should have warned me. All I remembered was thinking about the girl and driving like a ghost. Then the paranoia turned sharp. What if the package was a bomb? What if it was another message? What if it was her? I didn't want to think that, but my mind went there anyway. And right then, as if my fear had given the box permission to behave, I heard it. A faint ticking. At first, I thought it was my turn signal. Then I realized my blinker wasn't on. The ticking was coming from the passenger seat. I pulled over so fast my tires squealed I couldn't risk driving that box to the station. If it was explosive, I'd be bringing it right into a building full of people. I pulled into an empty parking garage on the edge of town, one of those concrete structures that always smelled like oil and damp. There were no cars, no people, no security guard in sight. I called it in and asked for the bomb squad. I told them about the case. I told them the package showed up at my house. I told them it was ticking. They told me to step away from the vehicle and wait. 10 minutes later, they arrived as quietly as they could, trying not to draw public attention. Watching them work made everything feel surreal, like I'd stepped out of my own life and into someone else's crisis. A technician in an armored suit approached the car, moving slow and careful. The sun was out, early autumn warmth hitting the concrete, but I could still imagine him sweating under all that gear. He opened the passenger door, reached in, and lifted the box like it was a sleeping animal. He set it down, cut the tape, and opened the flaps. The world felt silent in a way that made my ears ring. I could hear my heartbeat too clearly. Then the technician jumped back and yelled, "It's a finger," he shouted. Small one, too. Looks like it came with some kind of timer. For a second, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the garage. My lungs burned. My vision narrowed. The people around me blurred into motion and noise, but I couldn't move. I just stood there watching professionals handle what I knew in my bones meant one thing. Kaylee wasn't coming home whole. The next few hours barely exist in my memory. The box was transported to the station for analysis. People asked me questions, and I answered on autopilot. I ended up back in my office with the door shut, staring at nothing. The ticking of the clock on my wall started to feel like mockery. It got under my skin until I snapped and pulled the batteries out. I wanted silence. I wanted time to stop. I wanted the universe to take back what it had just done. That poor girl. That poor, poor girl. We had the note, we had the bow, we had a piece of her, we had nothing that led to a living child. And yet, we still had the tape. At some point, fueled by desperation and guilt, I put the VHS back in and watched it again. Then again, then again. I rewound it 4 times, leaning in, scanning the grainy edges, looking for an emotion that didn't belong. On the 5th watch, I saw it. At the back edge of the frame, near the tree line behind the store, there was a figure, mostly hidden, barely visible unless you were looking for something that didn't want to be found. A man standing just out of sight like he knew exactly where the camera's view ended. He lifted a hand and waved, beckoning. Kaylee's head snapped in that direction at 3:25 like she heard him. My mouth went cold, because the man was me, not kind of like me, not similar build. It was my face, my posture, the same wrinkles at the corners of my eyes, the same graying hairline, even the shape of my shoulders. I told myself it had to be a trick of the footage. Grainy tape can lie. Shadows can make people look like someone else. Stress can make you see what you fear. I tried to talk myself out of it like I'd talked suspects out of their stories for years. So I rewound it again and again. Each time my face became clearer, like my eyes were adjusting to an image they didn't want to accept. By the seventh rewind, it wasn't arguable anymore. It was unmistakable. Right then, Ripley burst into my office without knocking, startling me so badly my hand flew to the eject button. "You know knocking is still a thing people do," I snapped, trying to hide the panic in my voice. Ripley looked wired, energized by grim news. "Positive match on Kaylee's finger," he said quickly. I told the parents. "Search teams are shifting to recovery. This sick bastard is playing a game, but it's nothing we can't handle." I rubbed my temples, trying to keep my face neutral, trying to keep the tape out of sight like it was a weapon. I knew I didn't take that girl. I knew it with everything I was. But how do you say that when your own face is in the footage calling her into the dark? If I told Ripley what I'd seen, he'd do what any good cop would do. He'd treat me like a suspect. He'd put me in a room, take my badge, read me my rights. He'd tell himself it was impossible for an innocent man to be on tape like that. If I didn't tell him, someone else would eventually find it, and then I'd look guilty and secretive on top of everything else. Time felt stuck between those two options. I said nothing. "We're prepared for anything," I told him, forcing steadiness. "You find any prints?" Ripley's face fell. "Not one. We'll find her," I said, though I didn't believe it anymore. Alive or dead, eventually. He nodded like he wanted to believe harder. "Let's hope. We've got everything on this. I'm praying the right stars line up." "I'm praying too," I lied. Then he left me alone again. And the silence that followed was worse than the noise, because silence gives your mind room to build pictures. I was withholding critical information in a child abduction and murder investigation, not because I didn't care about Kaylee, but because I was terrified of what that information would do to me. That guilt ate at me until I could barely swallow. Someone was going to notice. Ripley, McClintock in forensics, anyone. There was no way the tape stayed hidden forever if it remained in evidence. So I did the worst thing I could have done. I took the tape home. I told myself it would be safer away from the station, away from curious hands. I told myself I just needed time to think. I told myself I could solve it alone, quietly, and then bring the solution back before anyone had to suspect me. For the next week, I called out sick. 20 years of near-perfect attendance, and suddenly I was down with something. Ripley didn't like it, but he didn't push it first. Cops understand burnout, even if we pretend we don't. At home, I went deep into Kaylee's life. I pulled every detail I could find: school information, teacher names, old addresses, family connections, anything. She was just a second grader from a middle-class family, so there wasn't much in public records at first. But I worked like I always did. Patient, thorough, stubborn. I checked social media too. I'm not proud of how much. I clicked through relatives, friends of relatives, anyone who had shared a missing poster or a prayer. That's where the next break came. And it was evidence I couldn't share because it was pointing straight at me again. A message popped up on my screen from an account I didn't recognize. "Do not look for me." My blood went cold. The same words as the note on the bow, like a fingerprint made of language. I clicked the message. An image loaded. I swear to you, I am not crazy. I did not fake it. I did not stage it. I did not create this. The photo showed Kaylee huddled in the corner of a dark concrete room. The lighting was harsh and uneven, like a basement bulb. She was in pajamas, but they were torn and dirty. Her hair looked matted. Her face was streaked with tears. She was holding her right hand close to her chest like she was trying to protect it. And even through the grainy quality, I could see the blood. Where her finger had been, there was a stump. And standing over her, towering and smiling into the camera, was me. Not a vague resemblance. Me. The same face, the same eyes, that same stretched, confident look on my mouth that I don't remember ever making in my life. Another message appeared under the image. Do not look for us. And then the chat went silent. That was the moment my reality started to tear. Not dramatically, not like some movie where the world spins and you pass out. It tore quietly, like fabric ripping under pressure. Everything I believed about evidence, time, identity, and truth suddenly felt less stable. But I still tried to think like a detective. Everything has an explanation. That was my religion long before I ever took Christianity seriously. There is always a human reason, a pattern, a trick, a culprit. I clicked on the account profile. It was almost worse than the photo. The entire account looked like it was dedicated to Kaylee. 30 posts begging for her safe return, prayers, missing posters, comments from friends. It looked like a concerned family member or a stranger who got emotionally attached to the case. All except for one post. Rest in peace, Kaylee. Heaven has gained an angel. There were a few tacky little icons after it, the kind people use when they want to sound heartfelt online. The thing that made my stomach twist was the timestamp. It was posted 2 hours before the bomb squad confirmed the finger belonged to Kaylee. 2 hours before that news existed publicly. That wasn't grief. That was knowledge. That was someone telling me, plain as day, that they were ahead of us. That they were watching the investigation like a game. And somehow they were using my face as the mask. I did something I shouldn't have done. I responded, after 20 years of training, after interrogations and surveillance and careful language, what I typed was pathetic. Who is this? The message was marked seen almost immediately. I stared at the screen, waiting for an answer, heart beating hard enough to shake my hands. My mind started to race, trying to predict what would come next. A threat, coordinates, another photo, a confession, anything. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Then I heard knocking at my front door. Fast, urgent. I checked my watch. 3:47. I blinked, convinced I'd read it wrong. It had not been 2 hours. I had been staring at my phone for minutes, not hours. I wasn't losing time. I couldn't be. Not with this much at stake. But the watch didn't change. The knocking came again. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. Ripley stood there. His expression told me everything before he opened his mouth. That careful look cops get when they're trying to approach a colleague like a friend, but preparing to treat him like a suspect. Hey, boss, he said, voice too casual. Have you seen that VHS tape? Some of the guys wanted a second look. We can't find it. I thought I saw you watching it, but it's not in evidence. Also, why'd you take the batteries out of your office clock? What's going on? Nobody's heard from you. People are starting to worry. I'm fine. I lied. And it tasted bitter. No, I haven't seen the tape. And I'm pretty sure I'm contagious. So you really don't want to be around me. I tried to shut the door. Ripley pushed it open with his shoulder. Not violent, but firm, like he was done playing polite. One more thing, he said. We found an interesting social media account. Figured you'd want to see it. Why don't you come with me to the office? We'll get it all figured out. I don't think so, I said. I'm too sick. A pause stretched between us. His eyes flicked past me into the house. Scanning, I could see him weighing what he was seeing against what he feared. We found fingerprints, he said quietly. Look, I just need you to come down with me, okay? Please. Just do me that one favor. He wasn't asking as a friend anymore. He was giving me a chance to cooperate before it became a scene. My heart started that ticking feeling again, like my own body had become a clock. Okay, I said. Let me get decent. I'll meet you in the car. I promise. Do you think I did him that favor? The back door was for me. The moment he stepped away from the front, I moved through my house like I'd rehearsed it. I grabbed what I could carry. I didn't think like a man making a rational choice. I thought like a cornered animal. I didn't know what waited for me at the station, but I knew it would end with handcuffs and interrogation room, and my name dragged through the mud while Kaylee's parents cried harder. So I left. I went into the woods. Because the woods don't have witnesses. The woods don't ask questions. As I walked, I thought about Kaylee. I thought about my own daughter, too. The one I lost years ago. The ache that never fully goes away, even when you pretend it has. I thought about what a prison cell would mean for a cop. What it would mean to be on the other side of the bars with other men deciding what you deserve. I walked for hours, deeper into the night, moving to the rhythm of my own breathing and heartbeat. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. Eventually, I saw lights again in the distance. A parking lot light post, bright against the dark. A corner store. My body went cold as recognition hit me, even before I could fully make sense of it. I ducked behind the trees, staying hidden, and moved closer. The store came into view, and with it came something that made my heart leap in a way that felt almost like relief. Kaylee Everson, standing alone, in pajamas, looking around in that same confused way I'd seen on the face. For one wild moment, I thought the world had handed her back to me. That somehow I'd done it. That I'd walked until I found the missing piece of the case waiting in the open. Yeah. I watched her for a while, trying to understand how she could be there. Alive, after the finger, after the photo, after everything. She looked small and lost and real. I stepped forward just enough that my voice could reach her. I called her name. Kaylee turned her head and looked toward me. And without thinking, without stopping myself, I lifted my hand and raised her over. Just like the man in the footage. Kaylee is safe now. I've decided to keep her until I can make sense of who took her. Until I can understand how my face keeps appearing where it shouldn't. Until I can separate myself from whatever is using my life. I know how that sounds. I know what it looks like on you. But I am telling you the truth as clearly as I can. Kaylee is safe. She will be returned, and she will be happy. But until I understand what's happening, until I understand what I'm dealing with, I cannot go back to why. I cannot let them take me before I am. So to Ripley, and to anyone else reading this, I am asking you one thing. Do not listen.